G'day everyone, it's me, the anti-theocrat, back with another one. Now, we could get kid noises in the background. We'll see how long this goes without them, huh? Yeah, so everyone's trying to make their little bit of political mileage out of the coronavirus. Let's go and have a look at everyone's favourite rag newspaper, shall we, to see what they've got to say. Admittedly, this is them just reporting on someone else's shit, but let's have a look. Oh, by the way, for those people who've said my videos were getting a bit short, and for the people who said my videos were long and tedious, I don't care. Look, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. You're either going to like it or not, and too bad. I'm just going to have to do the way I do. So, The Guardian. For anyone who knows what a hack newspaper is. Okay, covering climate now, renewable energy. Green energy could drive COVID-19 recovery with $100 teranewton boost. Speeding up investment could deliver huge gains to global GDP by 2050 while tackling climate change emergency, says report. Well, see, I don't give a fuck about this already because they're claiming there's a climate change emergency. And as somebody who 15 odd years ago was writing about climate change and was pro climate change, it's only 4 weeks or something since I found a police permit to run a walk against warming in my name. So I was actively involved in this. I'd read the science. I was writing about environment issues for a newspaper. I read the science that was available. I read the denial material that was available, and at that time, there didn't seem to be much argument that this wasn't something that was happening. I didn't grab hold of some of the more radical points of view going around, but I did note things like, my favourite one is that we were 3 or 7, depending on who you listen to, years away from the CO2 turning point, that we would reach the point where we had reached the maximum point before the damage was done. And that if we didn't cut off right now immediately all CO2 output, there was no way that we wouldn't see, we weren't going to see change for at least 3 years if we cut it off, which meant that cutting off now might just get us in under the first deadline. Now, oddly enough, I'm seeing exactly the same 3 and 7 year figures used 15 years later. This is 12 and 8 years after I was writing about this. They are still saying exactly the same things. Nothing's changed. None of the arguments have changed. Absolutely bloody nothing. But what happened was a lot of the things they predicted didn't come about. And now there's a lot more very good scientific rigour on the denial side. So I'm not actually fitting myself into any category here. I think I would like someone to point out a time in our history when we have actually had really stable climate. Okay, when we get told about climate stability, and we were told about climate stability in the day, there's still this instability going on all through it. Is there any time in the world's history where there has been absolute stability in climate? Maybe we're just going through something that I don't know the cause of, so I'm not sitting on either side of this fence anymore. But when you tell me there's a climate emergency and you're just telling me the same shit that I was listening to 15 years ago, I've given up. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck to listen to you anymore. So this is just a call for investment, and they reckon that this will, have huge gains on the global GDP by 2050, so, well within that 3-year turning point. I actually agree that by 2050 we will probably need to have diversified our energy resources by having a wider range available to us, by the way. I'm not against this. I'm against it being used. I'm against the climate activism. I'm against the climate alarmism. I'm against the fact that they are putting this up against COVID-19 as a recovery project. Renewable energy could power an economic recovery from COVID-19 by spurring global GDP gains of almost 100 teranewtons, $100 tons. I don't know what that fuck it is. I don't give a shit either. So between now and 2050, according to a report. Given that the article here doesn't go to any effort, I mean, Guardian readers aren't scientists. They're not involved in energy. So I don't think the Guardian itself knows what this is exactly. Otherwise, they would have explained it to their layman readers. And I probably am supposed to know what this is. I'm an electrical tradesman and everything. And I'm actually an advocate of alternate energy sources. I want to build my own windmills just for the technological experimentation, just for something to fuck around in my shed doing. It's actually something on my project list. So yeah, I'm not against all this stuff, but you know, do I give a shit about these figures? Not much. The Internal Renewable Energy Agency found that accelerating investment in renewable energy could generate huge economic benefits while helping to tackle global climate change. And this is the key bit, is that it's going to also help with tackling this so-called climate emergency. Because this is nothing. This is bullshit. You could have come out with this with anything. Energy Director General, the agency's Director General, sorry about that, Francisco La Camera, said the global crisis ignited by the coronavirus outbreak exposed the deep vulnerabilities of the current system. Did it? I haven't been without electricity. I've got a great big 6 kVA generator out the front of the bloody house. If I was without electricity, I'd just boot that into action. Diesel generator. Just sits in a trailer in my yard. And we're at the end of the grid, so I do get to use it occasionally. I could power half the bloody neighbourhood with it. And urged governments to invest in renewable energy to kickstart economic growth and help meet climate targets. Now, the reason I started with this article, because we're actually going to move away from this on a tangent when we get past this article, is that you could ask governments to pour money into anything in the economy at the rate that would be required here and see a recovery in your economy. In fact, if you wanted to recover your economy overall, the best way to do it, and this is the way that Australia tends to do it whenever we've had market crashes and things, is you give money to the consumer. And the consumer will spend that money as they see fit in the local economy. And that will drive the economy in the directions the consumers see as valuable to them. So if they see your energy production as valuable to them, they'll either, I mean, I used to have a superannuation in renewable energies until they started talking to me about activists and activism, in which case I withdrew it really quick, because that's not what you're meant to be doing for me. You are investing my money for my retirement. Not to support fuckwits out in the streets, kids out in the streets fucking wagging off school. So, yes, you could pour your money into the consumers and let them spend it, save it, do whatever they want with it in the marketplace, and they would grow the marketplace. It would grow in different ways. If they save the money, it goes into the banking sector. If the banking sector invests it in your renewable energies, then you end up with that money. So we don't need to pour all this money into you to grow your one part of the economy. In fact, that would be a really shitty idea, I think. I think we'd be better to spread this money around. So I just found this a really pathetic grab at money using coronavirus and the supposed climate change emergency. Yeah, and I just thought I'd bring it up because my second article I'm going to cover is this one from Vice. Oh, look at the poor lazy little cow. You will die of old age, we will die of laziness. Oh, climate change. Sorry. There's a climate strike in Thailand. Yeah, because you Thais have got the time to lay around the street doing nothing, don't you? The 2010s, this is a sign of wealth in Thailand, that you can afford to be laying around in the street protesting. This is a sign of special privilege. The 2010s killed off the polite climate change conversation. Yeah, I can't disagree. I mentioned it earlier that I was actually someone who was pro-climate change, and I have swung to the I don't give a flying fuck side of that. So you killed off any chance that I was going to be polite about this. The decade that began with the defeat of the relatively moderate climate bill, I'm guessing this is US-centric, is ending amid calls for capitalism to be dismantled. Yep, that's what it's the argument has changed from we need to do something about climate to let's fuck the whole system. Because let's face it, communism, socialism, they work, don't they? Not a fucking million years. That's what I'm going to add to that. In case anyone was wondering my position on that, I've lived in China. I married a Chinese national. No. Just no. In the past 10 years, we lost hope in American politics, realising we were being watched on the internet, and finally broke the gender binary, kind of. What? Why'd you feed this fucking shit in here? There was no gender binary online. I don't know where you got your ideas about the internet. I've been using computers on the internet since HTML was a baby. When there was fuck all websites out there because people were still learning how this shit worked. I used Grex to chat with people and, you know, we actually typed in our emojis. There was no fucking little graphic things. You made a little smiley. We knew the arty, we all knew all the bloody little letter combinations that gave us our emojis. So I don't know where you got the idea there was a gender binary, because I never had that idea, that the internet had a gender binary. Added that out of fucking nowhere. So many of the beliefs we held to be true at the beginning of the decade have since been proven to be false, or at least much more complicated than they once seemed. The Decade of Delusion is a series that tracks how the hell we got here. I think we're still suffering way too much delusion in this bloody situation. I think the delusion's gotten worse, actually. The screams to break the system because, we didn't achieve enough. Are you fucking insane? As we lurched into the 2010s, you wouldn't have been crazy for thinking that a solution for the climate emergency was within reach. It seemed it could even be accomplished without profound economic change. All we had to do, the prevailing early Obama-era political logic went, was to bring people of the opposing viewpoints, Democrats and Republicans, environmentalists and oil companies, hash out a plan to apply the appropriate tweaks to our economy, and voila, watch as capitalism took care of the rest. Capitalism is taking care of the rest. I just read an article about green energy, how we can pump more in, but I hate to tell you, there is plenty of money in there. One of the reasons I went, other than my love of alternate energies and energy technologies and the use of environmental energy to create electricity, other than that, it is a massive profit-making growth industry at the moment, and the amount of government funds being poured in from time to time and international investment. There was no chance my retirement fund was going into dangerous money by putting it into there. Because we have to have, I don't know how many of you are from other places in the world listening to this, but in Australia we have a thing called superannuation, which is legally required. If you make a wage anywhere, if you are working for someone, they have to put, I think, 10% of your wage into this superannuation, which is essentially a way of getting we small-time earners into the stock market. It was a way of stealing some of our money and putting it into the stock market, playing our money in the market, because the market runs out of money. It has all the investors it can have, and then it needs to search for more money. Well, superannuation was a great way to get us to invest money without us actually wishing to invest it all. So I have money in the market that I can't take out. I can if I'm in extreme financial hardship, but then what do I retire on? I don't qualify for a pension anymore. And don't worry, don't get me on that one. But yes, so that money has to stay in the market, and that money grows and is getting more in the market. So the market's not losing out. Admittedly, they are not getting massive numbers of new investors as they might like, but they're always going to have that steady increase. 10% of every wage earner's pay packet. So, yeah, that's why my money is invested, not because I'm wealthy and can do so. Just wanted to clear that up in case you thought I was lying in any of my other videos when I said I'm a poor man. Trust me, I don't have enough money to retire on. But my money was safe in renewable energies until they started talking to me about activists, and I thought, what are you actually doing with my money? No longer safe. Pulled it out, put it somewhere else. It's one of the things we can do with our superannuation. We can choose how to invest it. But a decade of GOP climate denial, fossil fuel industry obstruction, mounting climate disasters. I got to this point and I went, mounting climate disasters. Yes, tell me about this. I opened the link. From the New York Times, a forecast for a warming world. Learn to live with fire. I don't know why fire is picked out. I guess I know why fire is picked out as one of the major, signs that we're having a climate disaster is because it's hot. Fire is hot. Right here in Australia, we just had massive fires, and every article written about it anywhere in the media said climate change. Climate change. And then we had hailstorms in Canberra, our national capital, and not a word of how this might be climate related. And then we had rains. We've had drought-breaking rain. Our lakes here, I'm on a plateau in the middle of inland Australia, in the outback, and the only water sources here are two man-made lakes. We're not even on a river. The top of the plateau here does not have a river. It's very rare, but we're a mining town, so we're here for the ore, not for the water. It makes us a rare place because most towns are built near water sources. There isn't one here. They brought it in by train in the early days. They brought it in by horse cart. We had record-breaking rains that filled our lake for the first time in my youngest son's lifetime. That means at least 5 years since we've had that lake full. My wife remembers seeing it full. So somewhere between 8 and 5 years ago, we've been in drought for that long. and long enough for those lakes to dry up. And it just flooded out. Boom. We recently got 3 days worth of rain and it was full. Not a word about climate change. It's always about fires, and I suspect it's because they're hot and they look really tragic. Australia's fires had numerous reasons for having happened. Everything from the humans who had lit it, and apparently the lightning, even though we were right at the end of a drought period and there was no particular storm activity anywhere near me. And then they said it was record-breaking, and it turns out only in the state I live in. So yes, I looked that up. That was pretty shit. That didn't tell me anything about mounting climate disasters. All it told me was some bad fire years again. And I'm sure there are other things, because when I was reading about this science, all sorts of storms, hurricanes, cyclones, snow, sleet, hail, they were all going to be increased because of climate change. So why is it only ever the fires? Because they're hot. That's what it is. They're trying to sell you the idea that the planet is getting hotter, and therefore, when hot things happen, it is proof of hot. This is like the feminists claiming that Google searches for domestic violence prove domestic violence is happening. Okay, and the cataclysmic election of Donald Trump. Cataclysmic election of Donald Trump. Terrible, terrible thing. Sorry, still my favourite American president in my lifetime, because his effect on Australia has been the best we could have hoped for. We've got no new wars we're being dragged to, and none of our trade routes have been attacked. It's brilliant. I love the man, just from an Australian perspective. And I know Trump derangement syndrome's a big thing. I don't give a flying fuck. I look at what the reality of the situation is. The man has done us no harm. Pushed the climate fight into a much more radical and confrontational mode. I think Trump derangement syndrome may have done that. I don't know that he did. So much so that the optimism of 2010 now seems bizarre, if not delusional. The young less delusional than now? Sorry. I'm about to read a sentence that's making me think that we were far less delusional back in 2010 than we are now. The young leaders demanding an economic transforming Green New Deal, people like AOC, the insane, freaky-eyed looking little scrag, and the Sunrise Movement's Marishi, who in a fuck that is, I don't give a flying fuck. Sounds like a religious movement, which is more or less what this has become, but anyway. Along with the social movements that they help represent, take it as a given that capitalism is not the solution to impending climate doom. Yes, yeah. I wonder if this is another example of where Chinese money's going. Anyway, yeah, this is what they're pushing for. And it's not new to me that the socialists would grab hold of any crisis or any situation that they can drive as a crisis and make it their own. See, my walk against warming was less a protest and more just a stroll through the streets to highlight the fact that people had a concern. I gave up protesting because of socialists. When there were massive school closures in the state of Victoria here in Australia, I was living in Victoria. In fact, my old school that I went to became a housing estate. So yeah, there were massive school closures. That was going to increase class sizes for students, and a whole range of problems were going to occur. So anyway, I marched with the people protesting some of the school closures. And the socialists ran up and down the side of the march. This march included grannies, and it was just a wide range of people from across society. But the socialists ran up and down the sides of the march, waving the front page, the specially printed front page of the International Socialist, decrying that this was, their rally. Then when they started breaking down fences and things and had the dogs put on us, it was the socialists doing the damage to the property. No, there was a school being brought down. It had been stripped out. So what did they do? They went in and vandalised it. Yeah, that's going to make the government want to keep it up, isn't it? So I'm not surprised at all that socialists are taking hold of this and trying to make it their own. This, to me, is exactly what these people are about. The policies held up as solutions in 2010 are today regarded by many as insufficient half measures, and more people think drastic, society-altering moves are the only way forward. Here is how we arrived at this point. All right, before I move on quickly and brief through the how we got here, because I'm not that interested in how we got here, I'd just like to put forward that China is still building coal power plants. These people who are in these groups would be anti-nuclear. I can tell you that, having been part of these groups. And I'm not exactly a pro-nuclear person myself, although not for the same nut job reasons as most of these people would be. These people are anti-nuclear, anti-coal, basically anti-capitalist. Well, they're definitely anti-capitalist. But they have no real answers for how we are going to provide stable energy without other resources. It leaves someone like me who has an objection to nuclear energy thinking, well, fuck it, if you're going to make us stop using coal, then that's what we've got. Nuclear is our backup for the crap that you want us to put in. And right, I've already made it clear, I love this technology, but it is not stable. It is not going to provide constant base loads unless you've got really... there was a grid map made of Europe back in the day, how the entire EU could be gridded up so that you could have alternate energy generation in pockets all over the EU that would create a load that would be stable. Now, it overcame transmission and all sorts of things, apparently. I'm not convinced, but apparently it did. I live in a country where we can't do that. I am right at the end of the grid. Unless you put a power plant here and you feed it back to the grid, it's just not going to work for us. And the grid is wide and stretched and there's few people on it. It's just not an option here. So what's your solution? Build a nuclear power plant? See, I'm not happy with that solution. But that's where you leave me. We don't have coal, we're going to have uranium. You don't have another solution. Something you can just turn on. Because this is where the difficulty is. When the wind drops, out here the sun's not an issue, but we got higher radiation, solar radiation, than most of the world out here. But when you're not producing what's required, you need something else to fall back on. The beauty of coal and gas is you can turn them on, bang, they're on. You can't do that with nuclear, which is why it still needs a backup solution. And if your nuclear power plant goes down, like Chernobyl or Fukushima, they rely on backup power from the grid to keep their control systems and their emergency backup systems working. It's when they fail, like they did at Fukushima, or when they're offline, like they were at Chernobyl, that the problems start, that the problems can take over. So you need backup power. What do you have? You want reliable backup power if you've got a nuclear power plant running. Anyway, I'll move on. I think I've made some sort of point there. Hopefully you all get something out of that. That I don't think that renewables are going to be a solution fits all. Okay, apparently in July 2010, we don't have the votes. No, all right. In autumn of 2011, the Keystone XL pipeline battle becomes an emblem of the fight against the fossil fuel industry. In the US, no one out here gave a shit. July 19, 2012, fossil fuel divestment arrives. Okay, you say so. December 4th, 2013, we wake up to the reality of a looming $674 billion loss in the form of abandoned energy projects. We did? Apparently, UK think tank Carbon Tracker. I don't remember this one. I really don't. Global efforts to limit carbon emissions, climate change, energy projects worthless. Well, if you can't prove they're financially viable. See, you can't ask. Largely the people in these groups are upper middle class at least. It's very rare for the middle class or the lower middle class or below to be involved in these things. You can't afford it. You've got to think about career and keeping a roof over your head and family and all those sorts of things when you're in the lower economic groups. These groups tend to be people who actually teachers and upper and higher, because teachers have a lot of holidays. But yes, it's not something that just everybody can up and be an activist in this way. I did it because I'm an at-home father and someone asked me to write a newspaper column, so I did. I'd made myself a little known as an environmentalist by then. Anyway, yeah, I just think that when you talk about how this is going to cost people, you're talking the wrong language to win people over. When you say cost, that means something to people like me. September 2014, Naomi Klein's blockbuster, This Changes Everything, pins the blame for climate emergency on capitalism. Well, I don't know that apparently blockbuster, but it sounds like a load of shit to me, because, as I have pointed out, China is still building coal-fired power plants. Since I started going to China, that's that more than 10 years ago now, the amount of power being used in that country has grown astronomically. The amount of electricity. When I went out there the first time, the little village my wife is from, they were still heating the houses with a little coal burner that you all put your feet around the outside of it and sat around it, huddled over it. Now there's an electric heater in the corner of the room. This is a serious change in the way that the electricity in the house was required. A heater's not a low energy device. China's really needing a major increase in electricity, and one of the ways that they're keeping up with this increased demand is by building coal-fired plants. Communism is not making this better. I can't tell you any more than that about this, but communism is not a solution. Socialism is not a solution. December 12th, 2015, world leaders negotiate the Paris Climate Treaty. I hate the Paris Climate Treaty. I hate it with so much passion it is ridiculous. What it essentially does is it takes the poor people of the Western world, like myself and those poorer than me, and it dumps the whole burden of the world's CO2, excuse me, on our shoulders. Right, the supposed CO2 emergency that we face, that is the reason for climate, this climate alarmism, it puts the whole burden of that on our shoulders, as if it was trying to drive us to become poorer than we already are. Because we have to shoulder the growth, the economic growth of the second and third world. The Paris Climate Treaty allows the second and third world, including China, to continue to increase CO2 output while my country is supposed to decrease it. This is putting the burden of everyone else's CO2, and mind, the CO2 increase since 2015. Go away. Go away. The climate increase since 2015 has been more than all the CO2 my country produces, because the Paris Climate Treaty didn't stop it. It allows it to increase at my expense. I hate the Paris Climate Treaty with a passion. If you want to ask one of the reasons why I think Donald Trump is a great president, it's because he had the balls to step away from this stupid agreement. China could be slowing its power requirements. There's no reason it couldn't. It's actually reached a pretty good level at the moment. It has reached a level where a little energy saving would go a long way. And energy saving has always been my key fight, because more energy saving devices would do more to reduce our power requirement and our CO2 output than building more power. So I hate the Paris Climate Treaty. Detestable fucking thing. April 2016, Indigenous people put their bodies on the line to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock. I believe there was a lot of debate over this, even amongst the Indigenous people at Standing Rock. A lot of the people who were there at Standing Rock were not Indigenous people. But again, this is a US problem, and they dug under them, and who gives a shit? June 1st, 2017, Trump pulls out the US out of the Paris Climate Treaty. Yes! Win! Win for the poor people of the first world. Fucking about time someone did it. About time someone had the balls to pull us out of the climate treaty. The Paris fucking Climate Treaty. The Paris Make the First World Poorer Treaty. November 13, 2018, activists and AOC, dumb bitch that she is, launched the Green New Deal from Nancy Pelosi's office, which says something about Nancy Pelosi, dumb bitch. I got nothing more to say about those people. Really, I don't. The Green New Deal was such a piece of fucking shit. It was one of the worst pieces of policy writing ever put forward. It had no focus. It was all over the place. It demanded all sorts of things that had nothing at all to do with climate. Essentially, it was about ruining our system of economy and government in order to try to push through the idea that socialism would be a better deal. It's a problem I have had with Australian governments in the past. It seems to be something the Australian governments are getting a little less active on. But our medical system, our public healthcare system, we had in the days we had two parties: the party that created the system and the party that wanted us to go to privatised healthcare. And every time the party that started it came in, they pumped money in and made it healthy and well. And every time the other party came in, they would strip some pieces off it and make it less functional. Because if it doesn't function properly, then the next time you come into government, you can argue that it's not working. And you can strip some pieces off it and hand it over to the private sector. But then the other party would come back in and they'd rebuild it and it'd work again. Well, we seem to have settled on a position where our governments are just sort of letting it roll along. They make minor changes, but no one seems to be trying to strip it to make it not work, like the English have with their NHS. The NHS doesn't work partly because of the number of people who don't pay into it using it, and partly because the governments over time have stripped it to a point where it is less functional, because that gives them the right to privatise. It gives more people the argument that they would like to see it privatised because it doesn't work. I'm sorry, most of my life I've lived with a public health care system that works. I don't understand that argument. But that's what these people were aiming for with the Green New Deal, was essentially to strip away enough of our functional parts of our society so that they could declare that socialism was a better answer. That's all that is. September 23rd, 2019. How dare you? The insane little tart called Greta addressed the United Nations. Fucking hell, wouldn't I love to get an address at the United Nations? I guess you have to have $54 million in your pocket to be able to do that. After millions of teens skip school for climate. Yeah, there's some stupid fucking shit out there. If you want to be the drivers of the future, you want to be the people who change how we do things in the future, get yourself a fucking education. Stop pretending some retarded little kid is your god and that she knows everything. That kid said nothing I haven't written about 15 years ago. Absolutely not fucking one word out of that kid's mouth was new. But, admittedly, she's got health issues, mental health issues. At the moment, she seems to think she's had COVID, but no medical testing to see if she's had COVID. She's just going to sit around home going, oh, I was sick. The mental problems that she claims to have could very well have made her believe that she has that. But if she goes and gets tested, it'll show that she didn't. And that would be terrible. She can claim to be a victim at this point. I hate the way children are lifted up as the face of this activism shit. I have always hated this. I have never made my children part of my activism. This is fucking bullshit. One of the things I've learned as I've got older is children are stupid. I was stupid as a child. These people know nothing, have no education, no life experience, and Greta will never know what it is to be poor. To be one of the people who relies on the economy to work, relies on people to give a flying fuck about them rather than climate action summits in New York. They have good reason to be pissed off and mobilised. Global emissions continue to get higher and higher. Thank you, Paris Accord. And the effects of climate change are glaringly obvious from the fires, floods and hurricanes all becoming more common and severe. No, they're fucking not. Australia has just had massive fires. We've also had, because of green activism, a decrease in forest management. The highlands of Victoria are no longer grazed by cattle. They killed most of the wild horses off. They now keep the numbers down to an ideal number. But those places used to get cleaned up, they used to get burned out, they used to be grazed, whole lot of things. And still, we had fire seasons. And what will happen now is we've had so much fire that it's going to take 3 to 5 years before the green foliage that has come through now, because our country is actually built on fire. Some of our trees don't germinate until there's a fire, because the Aboriginal people burned the country. So our nation has to have fire. It really needs it to be healthy. In 3 to 5 years, the green young growth now will start to fall to the floor, and it will become susceptible to burning. It is going to be a 3 to 5 year cycle before we have major fires again in this country, unless we work out what the fuck we're doing to control the danger. I don't think these things got worse. It's just that you are so young, you've never experienced it before. Well, in my lifetime, I've experienced extreme fires in this country and floods on several occasions. And I grew up in cyclone northern Australia. The number of them actually dropped for a while. We're supposed to be in a cyclone season now, which might be why we've got drought breaking. But they had warned us at the start of the season we were going to get less, and therefore less rain. Now, if you can't predict this year's weather, how can you tell me about climate change? I understand the long-term thing, but I do not believe that you can predict. I no longer believe that you can predict that any more than you can predict tomorrow's weather. Because everything I wrote about 15 years ago has passed. It's gone. You missed it. You were wrong. In the which face of something like school seems pointless. No. You want to be the change, you've got to get a fucking education. Anyway, that's all I've got. I'm going to bugger off now. I hope I had a good enough rant to make you all happy. I hope it's long enough and short enough for everybody. I don't care. I'm going. My son is desperate to come and bother me, and there's a parcel at my office door. So I've been the anti-theocrat. May your gods remain fictional, and I will see you in the next one.